Previously in our series on clearing conditional formatting rules in Google Sheets with Google Apps Scripts, we learnt how to clear an exact range. So if the range matches exactly a particular range, that range will be cleared out, but any range around it or not exactly matching that range will remain. In the second tutorial, we covered how to clear any ranges within a target range. So that would be any range, this orange one here, and also the red ranges that don't exactly fit the outer target range, but are within the target range. In this tutorial, we are going to take things up a notch and we are going to clear out anything within a target range. So that means that anything within this target range will be removed for conditional formatting, but also this outer range, which traverses from A2, for example, to D8, anything within this target range here will be cut out of that. So there'll be these little individual ranges generated here within the range. Now, this is the trickiest part of this series here. So strap in and we will get into this tutorial. Now, if you're playing along, you'll be familiar with some of the parts of this tutorial already, and we will just cover them lightly to re-familiarize you with them. And then we'll dive into the specifics of this tutorial. If you're playing along, and I encourage that you do, there is a copy of this starter sheet in the link in the description below. So go ahead and make a copy now and come back and we will dive in. Okay, once you have your copy all opened up and you are in the AppScript IDE, let's see what we currently have. So we have two files here. We have our code.js file and we have a test.js file. Now our test.js file has two main tests in it. And the first one is going to be the overarching clear conditional formatting range overlaps test here. And then we'll also have this check range overlap and rebuild. Now, this is a pretty big test containing a lot of conditions that we're going to cover, but we'll talk about those as we get to them. Fortunately, you don't have to write this test yourself. It's already there for you, but you will have to build the function that requires that test. All right, so over at our code.js file here, we have our clear conditional formatting range overlap function here. And this function requires a spreadsheet app sheet and also a spreadsheet app range or spreadsheet app range array of ranges. Once the function is run, we need to determine whether or not we received a single range or an array of ranges, and then we will convert a single range to an array of ranges. And then we want to iterate through each one of those range sets. So for example, if we've just got a single range here, which we have in our test example here, or if we've got a collection of ranges, which will be this range, followed by this range, and followed by this range here, which is three ranges combined, as we have in our second test here. So from those ranges, we need to get the start row position, and then we need to get the last row position, and then we need to get the start column position and the last column position here. Once we have all those positions for each one of the ranges in our array, we will grab the current sheet's conditional formatting rules, and that'll get us a list of all the formatting rules. Let me select all over here and go to conditional formatting, and this will get all of these rules in this spreadsheet. Okay, and then we're going to set some variables up that are going to be updated. The first one is going to be the updated rules. So as we iterate through each one of the rules, we need to check to see if they need to be updated and then put them in the updated rules array to rebuild the rule set at the end. Now, keeping in mind when editing conditional formatting rules, you have to rebuild the entire rule set for each sheet tabs for it to come into effect, which is kind of time consuming, but we understand how it works now. So let's go ahead and do it. Finally, we have a has range change, and this is just a processing efficiency tool that if there is a change in the range, then we're going to rebuild that rule. But if there isn't a change, then there's no point spending that time rebuilding it, so we won't touch it. And then we get into the crux of things. So the first thing we are going to do is update those rules, and we're going to get the current rules, cur rules, that are in our sheet, so these ones here. And then we're going to iterate over them with the reduce method. And just as a reminder, the reduce method can take an accumulator. So that's one that adds up all the conditions. And then it can also take the current action. So in our case, that would be the current rule. So from here, we grab the current rule ranges. So each conditional formatting rule has a set of ranges. So we need to get those ranges and we need to do something with them. And we probably don't need this comment anymore, so let's delete that. Once we have each range, we need to iterate over those rules. So as you can see here, each rule has an array of ranges. So there's multiple ranges in each one of these rules. So there can be one, but there can be multiple. So we need to iterate over each one and then get those details to check. So then we do a nested reduce here, where we change our accumulator to be accumulator 2, so we're not copying the variable. And then we are looking at each of the ranges marked with an R. And then the magic begins. So let's get into our coding. So our primary task here is to clear all the range overlaps within a specified range. We will say const crule range location or range lock is equal to, and we will put this in an array, and that will be an object array. Okay, for each property of the object, we're going to say row start, rs for shorthand, just like we've done up here. So row start r.get row, then row end r.get last row, and then we want the column start, so r.get column. So get column will get the first column in the two-dimensional array, and column end will get r.get last column. Cool. So now we need to check if there are any overlaps, and if there are overlaps, we need to delete them out and perhaps rebuild the ranges within each conditional formatting rule. There are a number of conditions that may occur. Let's go ahead and have a look. So if you have a look at your sample sheet, scroll across the tabs down the bottom until you get to rebuild test. There are 16 conditions that we need to meet. So in this first condition, we have a range that entirely encompasses our target range, which is this one here marked in the green. So the green highlights that it's encompassing, but the blue indicates the target range. Okay, so it's just a change of color saying that there's something placed on top of it. In our second condition, that we have no overlap here. So there's no match, so no instance will occur. So this has range change will not change to true. Okay, in this condition, the range row is less than, and the first column is less than the target range here. And then it's also the last row is greater than the target range here. And then we've got this for the both left side and the right side. Now we flip this around again, we've got a condition where the start row is less than, but the column is the same as the target section or target range. And then the row ends after the target row range. And then we've got the alternative for the columns here. Next, our next example is similar here, but we've got a condition where our column start is less than the target range column start and greater than the column range target end. But the row starts somewhere in the middle of our target, but ends somewhere after our target. And then in our condition 8, we've got the flip side where the row starts before the target range. And then we've got conditions where there are partial overlaps on the corners of the target range here. You can see with these 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then finally, we've got conditions here where they have a complete match with either the columns or the rows, but there is some overlap with either the columns or the rows respectively. And then finally, we have multiple conditions here, and we are trying to meet each one of these conditions, each one of these scenarios that are here with one multiple condition has to be met. Now, what are the numbers doing here in these lighter colors? So this is how the existing range will be broken up. So here we're going to have where a complete overlap occurs. We want the range to be broken up into this one, then this one, then this one, and then this one. So there'll be 4 individual ranges. It's going to be 3 individual ranges here, 1 here. There's going to be 3 here. There's going to be 1 here, 1 here. And you can see there's in this final example here, there'll be multiple individual ranges broken up into from this master existing range here. Okay, so with this complexity in mind, we need to build something out that handles for all of this, and it is going to be fairly custom. So we probably don't want it in this function. We want to create our own function for it, and that'll make things a bit easier for us to test as well. So before we do that, let's just do something quickly here. We are going to check the sample ranges against the target ranges and remove any overlapping ranges that we have. And we're going to put this in our const c rule new ranges variable here. And that's going to call a function called check range overlap and rebuild. And we just put a little underscore there to make it a quasi-private function. And that's going to take our target range. So that's this one here. So our set target range that we have. And that will be these target ranges here, as you can see. And then it's also going to take the range locations that we generated here. So this one here. Okay, let's hit save. And we'll mosey on down to this section here. So currently we have our check range overlap and rebuild here. And it's going to take, like we said, our targets and the range we're potentially going to erase, which we've marked with erased here. And we'll just set that little console log for our testing in a moment. So we need to create a couple of let variables here. So that's variables that are going to change. And these will change on each iteration. So on each iteration, check the range. And our first one is going to be let new ranges. So this is what we're going to be building out with our new set of ranges. So it'll be an array of ranges for the set range that we iterate through. So remember, this is occurring back up here, here, as we iterate over a single range in a rule set. So it will be called quite frequently. So then we'll say let check ranges, and we'll just put them, and we'll spread those check ranges, check CK ranges, and then we'll spread those check ranges out with the spread operator to create a brand new unique array of the erased ranges. So we're not updating the existing array of erased ranges or potentially erased ranges. And then we also want to get the length of that array. So it will be help with our iterator as well. So length. So let check ranges length. That's going to be equal to check ranges dot length. Okay, so we're in a pretty good spot here. We want to run a bit of tests. So let's head back over the test, and this is probably a good time for us to review what's happening in this test function we built. So in this test, we're going to run each one of these conditions that we have here to identify them, and it should return the difference. So these remaining values in this range here, so we can always cross-check against them and make sure they're all working properly. So let's head down to our test check range overlaps, rebuild, and we're going to grab a number of variables here, which will be plugged into each one of these test conditions here. So first will be our targets, then our samples. Our samples are going to be the existing conditional formatting range, and our targets will be this range here. Then we have our resp or response array here. So we want to see what the response, the actual response is from our test, and then our expected response here. And then we want to compare the two. And how do we compare the two? Well, we've got our little function test here, and it's going to compare the arrays that have been stringified, and it's going to see if the two stringified arrays match. If they do, the test is passed. If it doesn't, the test has failed. Okay, let's look at our first example here so you know what's going on. First, we have a set of targets. Our target is this one here, so number 1. And our target row start is 3, and row end here is this one here. And then our column start is column 3, and column end is here. So that's our target. And the sample starts on row start 2, column start 2, so up here, and ends on row end 5, column end 5, which is here. Okay, so our expected result is that we're going to create 4 new ranges. The first one is going to be above, marked with number 1 here, and that'll match this one up the top here. And the next one will be below. So we're going to look at this 5, 5, 2, 5 here. So this one here. And then we want a left range here. So it should be should be 3 by 2 and 4 by 2. So 3, 3, 2 and 4, 2 here. And then a N1 here, which is going to be row 3 by column 5 and row 4 by column 5 here, which we've got 3, 5 and 4, 5. It's probably best in your own time to go through this in more detail, but we'll cover a little bit more further in the tutorial, but this is a good test. All right, so if we run our test now, we should see some success, perhaps with an error at the end here because we haven't built our rules for it yet. So let's just go ahead and run our test check range overlap, and we should expect to see this being printed out and then our targets and erased here. And let's just make things a bit more explicit in our console logging, and we'll say comma here. And then we'll just put this in quotation marks so we know what we're looking at. Do the same with this little cheeky one. And quotation marks. Hit save. Go back to our test. Test check range overlap rebuild. Got it. Hit run. Okay, and we've got a bunch of tests occurring here. We just want to check that we've got targets here. So the first one that's fed in is this one. And then what's going to be erased is this one, correct? And then we've got some information about the target, but it's not going to work because we haven't got all the guts of it built yet, right? Okay, so we know things are working so far. All right, doing well, team. Now we need to iterate over our target. So remember, we can have more than one target range, just like we have here, where we've got 12 different targets, but we only have one range that we're checking against, this erased one here. So we need to iterate over each target area to check the range overlaps. So we will say targets for each, and we'll do it for each leg. So for each target in our targets array, so we can use the shorthand T here, it'll be fairly explanatory. I think I'm getting influenced by Golang by reducing my variable names to single characters. I apologize if you don't like this. Okay, and what do we need to do? So loop through check ranges, and then what's it going to do? Okay, so this allows us to check for any ranges we create when we have multiple target ranges. Why is this important? Well, we could be building out this check ranges as we go. These ranges may split, but once we have a split, we might still need to check to see if that range has an overlap with another one of our targets. So we will probably add to this check ranges list and remove from it as we iterate. So we will say while check ranges length is greater than 0, we want to do some work. And then we'll say we'll create a constant called S, and this is going to be our source, basically, or sample. So essentially it's going to be these erased values here. So const check ranges, and the first one we want to iterate over is the check ranges length. So we're going to do things a little bit in reverse order here, -1. And that's going to contain, remember these, we've built these out earlier, and they're going to contain these RS, RE, CS, CE values here for the currently existing, or the source, conditional formatting. So let's make a note here, we'll say S equals source or erased. And then we'll say, the first thing we need to do is to check if the source conditional formatting rule doesn't touch anywhere within our target conditional formatting rule. And if that's the case, we just want to exit this process immediately and return it. No more processing required. So this will be an early exit return. So to do this, we'll say if, and we're going to make a bunch of conditional formatting rules. So we'll put this on multiple lines just for clarity. We'll say S, if S, so source row end is less than target row start. Okay, so what's happening here? So if the source, so this is our source here, for example. If the source end row 4 is less than the target, so the yellow one, row start, so perhaps the target starts here, then nothing's going to happen, right? Because there's no overlap, we don't need to do any processing. what's another condition? So we've got 4 conditions here. So have a think about these conditions now. See if you can fill them out yourself. Just looking at this image here and seeing, okay, what's happening over here, what's happening over here, and what's happening over here against this source. All right, so we've got another OR statement here. So next one, condition might be if the source row start is greater than the target row end. Okay, so what's this condition? So if the source, this is our source here, so the row start is greater than the end of the target row. So let's say perhaps our target row end is here in this row 2, but our source starts on row 3, no overlap again. Or if our source column end is less than the target column start, so similar occurrence to this row 1, and this matches the current sample condition here in number 2 here. So if the source column end, so this is the end column here, is less than the start of the target, no overlap. And finally, if the source column start is greater than the target column end, we also don't need to do anything. So in this case, if our value starts here, so if our target's here, but our source conditional formatting rule is here, we don't have to make any changes. We've created our condition. What are we going to do now? So we need to just say new range, or new ranges. Remember this one up here. We just need to push the source, so the original source conditional formatting rule. So new ranges dot push source. Sweet. However, if this is not the case, we need to first check the rows. We could first check the columns, but we're going to check the rows first. So we'll say row check here. And we're going to create a method inside this function here. And it's going to require our source conditional formatting rules and our target range. So source conditional formatting range and our currently iterated target range. And I've built this inside this function here just in case when you're going to copy and paste this into other projects and there's no overlap in methods. So let's create this row checks method here, internal method here. Let's see what we're going to build first. Okay, so we're going to check the row overlaps and create new ranges based on any row overlap here. So we've got this matrix range here. Now the matrix range is a custom JS doc type definition, which I've already built up here. So matrix range, and it's going to contain the RS, row start, row end, column start, column end. And it's just going to make it easier for us when we're typing to autocomplete. All right, let's build that function now. So function, row, check. Going to take the source conditional formatting range, the current one, and then our target. And now we're going to run a bunch of checks. So let's create some if conditions. So if, what's our first condition? So if the source row start is less than the target dot row start. So let's see. So we'll put a note here. So we want to look at conditions like this. So this is where our source row starts here and our target row starts here. So there's another condition like that there. Here's another one. Here's another one here as well. So then we need to, let's nest. So we'll say if we're looking at those conditions and we know there's more than one. So we need to then check if the source row end is less than or equal to the target row end. So if the source row end ends at or before the target row end, we're going to add a top row here. So this would be our top row indicated by 1. Then we'll say let, and we'll just indicate those ranges by an n here. So we're at n1 equal, and then we need to create a new array, and that's going to row start colon source dot row start. So now remember we're rebuilding the range here, and then row end is now going to equal the target dot row start -1. And then the column start for the new range is going to equal the source dot column start. And then the column end is going to equal the source.column_end. So right now there's no impact on the column, but we have an impact here. So we've got the row start is equal to the source row start. So for example, in this one, we've got our source row start here. We want to keep that start, but we want it to end as soon as it touches this starting row here. So the row before that. So that's where we've got the target row start -1. So that will keep this range here. Of course, it could go for multiple ranges like this, for example, for this one. And then we don't want to do anything with the start column or start end just yet. So now that we have that new range, we can add that one into our new ranges. So new ranges dot push, and we'll say N1, our top one. And then we want to change our source row start now to equal our target row start. And then we're going to want to check the columns for those target row starts and make sure that they're not overlapping. If they are, we need to cut them out as well. So then we're going to send this off to our col check with the source and the target. And remember, the source has been updated. Now this is going to be a function similar to the row check, and we'll handle that in a moment. Let's just get this row check sorted out first. Okay, so we've got our col check done, and let's go else if, and what's our next condition? So remember, we're still in this if the source row start is less than the target row start. We've got another condition that says if the source row end is greater than the target row end, then we need to add some stuff to the bottom as well. So in this case, we would have both a row start range and then a row end range. Same as example 3, 4, 5, and that's it. With sample 7, we'd have a bottom one. Sample 8, we'd have a top. Okay, so let's create this condition now. So if the row ends after the target, then we need to, so remember, if this ends before the target, we just have to add this, but if it ends after the target, we need to add the top and the bottom in. So we just need to redo this one. So we need to put this one in here again, but now we also need to add a bottom in. So we'll say let, and we mark this as 4 or the bottom one. So we'll say N4 is equal to, and let's just copy this in, and then we'll make some mods, hey? So what's the condition now? So this time for the bottom, we want to say if the row start, so the row start will be the target row end now, and that'll be +1, and then the row end will be the source row end, and then our columns aren't going to change for the time being. And now we need to do some updates. So we need to say our source row start is now equal to our target dot row end, and our source row end is now equal to our target dot, so row end, this should be row start. So our source row start is now equal to our target row start, and our source row end is equal to our target row end, and this will allow us to build any necessary columns that we have here, which means we need to go col check, and that's going to be the source and the target. Okay, so we've exhausted the condition where the source row start is less than the target row start. Now we need another condition where the else if the source row end is greater than the target dot row end. Then what do we need to do? Then we need to check if the source row end is greater than the target dot row start. So if the source row end is greater than the target row end, then we need to add the remaining range to the bottom. Okay, so this will be a bottom range here. And I just noticed up here I didn't push that range, so let's go new ranges dot push N1 and N4. And we need to do the same here. So we'll say new ranges dot push, and that will just be N4. And then we need to also say s dot row end is equal to target dot row end to check for the columns. And then we're going to do our col check S, comma, T. So we'll say col, check, source and target here. Cool. All right, let's build out our column check now. So underneath, we'll say function. Okay, so col check here. Again, we've got a start. Oh, so we've got a source and a target. That should be source. And let's build this out. So very similar process to what we have here, but a little bit shorter. Not as many rules to make. So let's say if our source column start is less than our target dot column start, we're going to do a bunch of stuff. Then we need to also check if our source column end is less than or equal to our target column end. Okay, so what's going on in these two conditions? So if our source column start here is less than our target column start, well, our target column start here, well, this condition would match, this condition wouldn't. So I would skip this if condition. This condition would match. So with this condition, and this condition would match, but these ones wouldn't. This condition would also match. Okay, and then if our source column end is less than or equal to our target column end, so if it doesn't exceed, so if this one for example, it's not less than our target column end, so this one wouldn't match, but these would match here, and this wouldn't match because it goes over to the other column. This would match, and this would match here. This would also match here. Then on this condition, we just want to add a left column range. So here we'll say let, and we've been marking this with 2 on our sample sheet here. So we'll say let n2 equal. So in this condition, we've got our rows here. So nothing's going to change with our rows because remember we updated them up here. So we'll say row start is equal to our source dot row start, comma, and our row end is equal to our source row end. But our column start is going to be equal to our source dot column start because yeah, that's our source here. The conditional formatting rule covers this, but then it's going to end 1 minus the start of the target. So col end is going to be equal to the target dot column start minus 1. And now we need to push this new range into our new ranges. New ranges dot push and 2. Cool. All right, so we've got another condition here. So we can also say else if the source dot column end is greater than the target dot column end, then what do we want to do? So in this condition, we're saying if the source column start is less than the target column start, so it has to be here, but also if it's greater than the source column end is greater than the target column end. So sample 1 would be met, sample 6 and 8 would be met, 7 would be met as well. Probably missing some here. No, that would be it. So all those conditions would be met. So in this case, we still want to do this as N2, but also we want to do N3, where we want to add to the right as well. So we'll change this to N3 this time. So our rows are fine, so we can skip them, but we're going to do some stuff here where we say the column start now is going to be equal to the target column end plus 1. And then the column end is going to be equal to the source column end, the source column end. Okay, and then we're going to go to new ranges dot push n2, comma, n3. Okay, so they've been added in. Cool. So we're getting close, gang. Okay, so now we've got everything inside the condition where the source column start is less than the target column start. But what about if we've got the conditions like this, where the source column end is within the target? Let's have a look at that. So else if the source dot column start is greater than or equal to the target dot column start. And we can also, we've got the source. So the source column start, so this is a good example here, is greater than the target column start. And we could also have the condition where we'll say and if the source column end is greater than the target column end. Then we're going to say let, and in this case, we're just going to use our N3 rule here. So we'll say this one here, Control C, Control V to paste. And then we need to add that new ranges dot push N3. Otherwise, we do nothing. All right, well done. So we've got through our column check and our row check. Let's head back down to our main loop here. So we've done our row check, which will also do our column check. Okay, so we had this if statement here where it push new ranges. Now we don't actually want the row check to occur every time. If this occurs, then we just want to stop this while loop. Well, we just want to move to the next range in this while loop. So let's just put an else statement here. And then we'll put the row check up in that else statement. Oh, cool. Once we run the check on this last value in these check ranges, so remember that first value is going to be the erased one, then we don't need to check that one anymore, so we're going to pop it off that check ranges array. So we'll say check ranges dot pop. So after we do our check ranges pop, we'll redo the length, so we'll say check ranges length is equal to check ranges dot length, and then we want to update the check ranges to look at the new ranges. Then we will set the new ranges to an empty array for our next iteration of our for each loop here for the next target. So that's ready to go for the next target. So just to recap what's going on here, we're going to check the ranges that we've just generated, just in case there's no new overlaps with new targets for the next iteration of that target. If it is, then the ranges will be broken down into smaller ranges further. Okay, then we will say check ranges.length is going to be check ranges.length again. Hit save. Finally, outside of our targets loop, we want to return our check ranges. They will be the ranges that we are going to return back to update our conditional formatting rules. Let's hit save. And go back to our tests and head over to our check ranges overlap rebuild and hit run. And see how we went. Okay, so we've got an issue here, 243. Let's go have a look. Okay, so let's see what happened here. Let's go have a look. Okay, let's have a look. So it's 243, but it wasn't getting through on the second iteration. I think so. This is the error here. Spelling. There we go. Okay, let's run our test to see how we go. Well, I'm seeing some fails in here, so we made some mistakes, but it's okay. We've got a test. Fix these problems. Okay, 3 is good. 4 is good. 6. Left and right only, partial and full. So 6 is not picking up this one. What else? And 7. Bottom full and right. So what's the bet? It picks up 8. Yeah, 8 passes. So something to do with the bottom here. Okay, let's go to our code and have a look. Here we go. Our source row should be the start So remember our source row start here, and if it's greater than the target row start, so it means it's within this area and then from down. And then we check if it's the source row and that also have to be equal to, because we want a condition where it's here, perhaps not here, but actually here. So like this one, for example, here. So let's equals. And oh, we also just noticed here that we've got 2 column checks. Well, this one's going to cover this issue anyway, because it's within this if else statement. So let's get rid of that. Otherwise we'll get some extra values. Hit save and run our test again. Oh, it's looking better, huh? Let's have a look. Pass, pass. Pass, pass, good. Cool, all our test conditions are passed, even in this big magical one here, where we have a lot of targets in blue, and then 1 conditional formatting range that needs to get wiped out. We made it. Now that we've built our check ranges overlap and rebuild, let's head back up to our main code here. It's clear conditional formatting range overlaps. We've executed this in here, and we're going to store the return values, so all the ones cut out from our target, in our cReal new ranges. And now we need to check if there's been a change. So we can do that by saying if we can check our cReal new ranges JSON stringify, so as a string, and we can check that against our cReal range lock, so against these ones here. And if they are not the same, then we need to update some stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say if JSON.stringify cReal new ranges does not equal JSON stringify cReal range lock. Now, why can't we just check the length of both values? Well, we could have a situation where we have the same range. For example, this one here, where it's just going to return 1 range that it's entered. So the 2 ranges would match, but it's going to be a different type of range here. Now, because we're making a change, we can say gets the Google Sheet range. And we can create a variable called const cReal new ranges updated. And that's going to be equal to cReal new ranges. And then we're going to map this new rule. So we'll say map. So it means iterating over that new rule, returning each item in the array in a new manner. So cReal range is going to be equal to little arrow function here. And then we need to return sheet.getRange. So we need to grab this sheet range now for our new rule. And that's going to be cReal range dot rs row start cReal range dot column start. Then it's going to be cReal range dot row end minus, because remember when we're doing get range as values, it's going to be the start row, start column, the column, the row length, and the column length. So cReal range dot row start +1, comma, duplicate that one, and just change this to column end and column start, and that should do that. Cool. All right, and then we now know that we have a range change. So has range change is going to be equal to true. So now we know to rebuild with the new ranges down here. Okay, so we'll make a copy of the rule and then we'll set the ranges with the new rules. And then we need to update this accumulator here for the ranges. So that will be return ACC2 is equal to ACC2.concat. So concatenate to join together, C rule, new ranges updated, save. So this accumulator will now update this array of new ranges, which is ACC2 here, with the remaining rules A1 ranges. So I'll store that. And then those remaining rules A1 ranges will then be stored in the updated rules here as it iterates through. I think that's it. So just as a reminder, once those new ranges have been added to the remaining rules, we get the remaining rules length. If there are no remaining rules left over, in a weird situation, perhaps our conditional formatting range was within, then we're going to return just the accumulator. Say, hey, we don't want to build that conditional formatting rule again. However, if there are some remaining rules, then we need to check if there has been a change. So in all these conditions except for condition 2, if there has been a change, then we make a copy of that rule and we reset the ranges with the remaining rule A1 ranges that we've just generated from our check range overlap rebuild, and then add them to our accumulator for that conditional formatting rule, and then return the accumulator. If there wasn't an impact on that current rule, then we just add the accumulator back. And then once everything is done, that's going to store everything in the updated rules, and we'll reset our conditional formatting rules for that particular sheet with our updated rules. Hit save. Okay, back to our test. Now we're going to change our test item to this top one, clear conditional formatting rules here. And we'll head over onto our sheet to test 3. Now in this situation, we should see a big white hole here where even this range has been extracted. Now I'm going to move across this a bit so we can grab the conditional formatting. Let's hit select all so we can see it all. Conditional formatting, there it is there. Okay, so this, and this should be removed, and then this should be updated with these nuanced ranges here. So let's just hide this second one here, and we'll comment that out, and then we'll go test clear conditional formatting ranges overlap and hit run. And it should just get rid of this B4 to C7, empty that right out of conditional formatting. We haven't made a mistake. Sweet. Awesome. So now if we click on this range here, we can see now it's chopped this range right up to this A2 to D3. So over to here. Then we should have another one saying A8. Where's that? A8 to D16. All the way down to here. Which is fine because this is just a fill based on if there's a text or not. What else we got? Should have an A4 to A7. Yep, that's good. And then there should be a D4 to D7 in there as well, which is here. Yeah, nailed it. Cool. All right, let's cancel that. Cancel out of that change here. And hit Control A again. And let's Control Z to bring all that back. And now let's also include this multi-range clear here. And we'll also have to run that. Okay. Let's go ahead and run both this single instance and then this multi-range instance. So we should see all of these ranges here, here, and here, and even this top one now removed. Okay, let's hit run. There it is. Okay, so we've cleared all the conditional formatting within a target range. It's been a long process. But you can see that there's lots of nuance changes, and we have to modify the conditional formatting rules to cut out those ranges. So that's why it does take a bit of work to handle. But as you can see, the processing wise, it's relatively quick. In the next tutorial, we're going to cover how to now set a new conditional formatting range within a sheet tab where there's already existing ranges. A lot easier. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more tutorials like this, subscribe. Until next time.